Welcome to Global Risk Community Chat. Today our guest is Victoria Martin. I'm very happy to have you today here, Victoria. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a very informative chat with you.
Yes, likewise. So let's then, without a further ado, let's get into it right away. But before we do, can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Of course. So I'm Victoria Martin. I am the Head of Compliance and Reg Affairs at 10X. Just a little bit about my background. So I started off in a traditional bank. So I was at RBS for 5 years in both first and second line oversight roles. I then decided I wanted something a bit more exciting. So I moved to a couple of fintechs. So I was at Tandem Bank, helping with them with their regulatory applications and also setting up their compliance framework. I also worked at Clearbank, so supporting on regulatory change programs, so mainly PSD2 and GDPR. And then I moved to a fintech consultancy called 11FS, so supporting our clients on new greenfield propositions. So I had a great opportunity to work both in the SME space and with a Saudi client. And then for last year, I have been at 10X. So my role is essentially working with our clients to make sure that we are building the product to be compliant with their needs. And then the second half of my work is actually working with our product team. So helping them understand regulation, legislation in the jurisdictions that we operate in.
Yeah. Sounds super interesting. I also hear a lot of diverse background, diverse experience on that, and super nice. So what topic you would like to share with us today?
So I think the one that I would like to discuss is ways of working, particularly for risk professionals and the way that the market is moving. So one of the things that I've seen in my experience is essentially adapting your risk management approach for either your clients or the businesses that you work in. With the move to agile over sort of the last 5 to 10 years, like risk has really had to adapt. So actually working in a traditional second line role doesn't really work for new startup or fintech propositions. And what I've actually seen is what I call a 1.5 lines of defense. So essentially, even if you are a traditional compliance function, actually taking that step back and thinking, right, what do I need to do to help the business? So that might be directly advising product and engineering teams on, it can be anything from compliance to actual sort of risk management. And actually, one of the cool things that we've done at 10X is use the same software that we have as our engineers to essentially implement our risk framework. So we use Jira for all our sort of risk management and tracking. And that creates quite a neat way where you can identify or get the business to raise risks in a way that works for them, and then have a traceability of, linking things back to tickets and, essentially being able to evidence how you're managing your risk appetite. I think also the other thing I would sort of say with like risk ways of working adaptation is also looking at RegTech technologies that you can actually utilize to simplify some of the traditional things that were probably normally done on spreadsheets. So, for example, one of the things that we use within 10X is a piece of software called Cube, where essentially that does all our reg horizon scanning, rather than having to scroll through different regulators' rule books, for example. It's quite a cool way to essentially do that tracking. And usually I will have seen that actually done in a spreadsheet, which is an absolute nightmare to maintain. And then probably the third thing that I would say is educating the teams that you're working with, particularly on regulatory developments. So, one of the things that I have seen done well and not so well in some of the organisations I've been at is making sure that you're aware of, what is on the horizon and where the regulator is heading. And because it's so important in making sure that you are building products and propositions that are going to be future proof. You know, doing a regulatory change program can be incredibly expensive. And actually, we have quite a unique selling point where we go to our clients and say, well, we know this piece of regulatory change is happening. We can make sure that we're building a core banking platform that's actually suitable for your needs, and actually being on the front foot on these changes, particularly from a resourcing perspective, and that kind of things.
Yeah, sounds quite interesting. I'm hearing a lot of key things in terms of this change, in terms of technology and or like training and, but also some on the communication end as well, in the sense that, you know, I think the risk managers or compliance managers should involve themselves more with other functions as well, kind of a thing.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, it's so important because, you know, what you want to be involved in product development life cycles. You do not want to do the traditional second line where you review everything before it goes live, and then you see a load of issues, and then there's a whole load of rework, and, you know, deadlines don't get met, that kind of thing. So I think it's so important to embed compliance and risk management in that whole product life cycle. And it's not just a tick box exercise. One of my favorite phrases is the use of paper compliance. So, you know, you might have a risk management committee that will review a product before it goes into launch, and it is purely just an overhead, a tick box exercise of like documentation. Actually, what you want to build is a really good relationship with your business units, where they are proactively coming to you with questions, and essentially you're a trusted advisor for that business, to ask them either questions they don't understand or anything that they need clarification on.
No, that's I completely agree on that, and I think like people, or most of the risk managers or compliance managers, are a lot still on the more traditional end. Traditionally, of the checkbox or the the just having that kind of a system at hand. But no, I think this kind of a change is indeed what also we need on our end. And well, since I just want to ask a bit more about this because I find it really interesting, and I think this kind of a change is very important. Are there maybe some takeaway points, some easy things our viewers, some compliance managers or the risk managers in our community can already start implementing, maybe with, you know, like small steps?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I do is I have check-ins with sort of the key product people that I work with, and also with my clients. I think building that rapport with the teams that you're providing oversight on is so important. You know, what you do not want to be seen is a blocker. So, you know, there may be things that I do actually push back on and say, you know, that you just can't do that. But it's actually working with your sort of business areas to try and get to a solution that is both pragmatic but can also work within the rule book. And then I would say, like, there's probably the other thing, it is kind of what I've said before, but it is educating. So a lot of the challenge that you know, I've had is that people just don't understand the rule book, or, you know, particular interpretations of regulation. So if you have to explain, you know, the FCA has given an opinion that can't happen, and you explain that to your teams, that really does seem to work. And then probably the other thing I would say is just organisation. So you know, I've worked with risk people before where you know, they've kind of surprised the business with maybe a piece of regulatory change, or haven't informed them quite correctly or with enough guidance on a piece of regulatory change. So I guess, like, the whole takeaway is making sure that you're bringing the business on that journey with you, and that you're working together rather than enforcing either, like, you know, a view or a particular ways of working, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense to me, and I think that's a great takeaway to share. So since we are running a little bit out of time, I just have the last question, and that is how it is for you to be part of risk community. You've been, of course, and also multiple ends of it, and also from the compliance end of things. So how is it for you in general?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I really like talking to other sort of compliance and risk people, particularly in the fintech space, to see how other people are doing things. I think there's still a massive learnings that we can have on, you know, how fintech is moving and how that can be incorporated in some of the larger corporate institutions. So I think there's probably more where we can both work together, because ultimately, you know, fintech, regtech, that's not going to go away. That's going to be the new ways of working, particularly, you know, with the amount of new sort of startup propositions that we're seeing. So I think we probably just need to build on that network of sort of the risk community in the various different industries, not necessarily even in banking, like, you know, that there's other regtech industries that we can learn from. So sort of building that knowledge sharing hub.
Yeah. That's super nice. Thank you so much for joining us today. Unfortunately, we are kind of getting out of time. I wish I could hear more, of course, but yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Likewise. Have a great day.
Thank you.